Interesting story I want to share with you this morning. You've heard me joke with Shannon Wise, like she's on Twitter all the time, getting sports scores and sports information. Like any minute of the day, she's on Twitter. For people who follow Twitter, certainly yesterday afternoon got all kinds of attention. Twitter did not work. And it's not the first time in the month of July. There has been all kinds of speculation about what happened to Twitter, why it was down. Some have even suggested some form of terrorism. Some have suggested capacity. Some have suggested that, it's the Olympics in England. So certainly we want to get a read of what happened, and some are suggesting this could even happen again this weekend. Dave Redekop is a good friend of our program. He's with Nerds on Site, and he joins us live this morning from his office. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Steve.
David, you heard all this. What do you make of the situation with Twitter?
Well, the first thing I was thinking, Steve, is that there was not a time not long ago when this was a regular occurrence, and a industry standard term became known as the fail whale. In fact, Twitter found a way to make each failure almost kind of fun. They would display a big whale on their page, on their website, when Twitter was down. It was so common that the fail whale was seen sometimes several times a day. But in the last year and a half, 2 years, it really has become much more reliable, and people are now used to it just being up all the time.
Thus leads us to this story here. The Twitter people are saying they just basically had a failure on their system. The backup of the backup didn't work. And some are still saying, nah, that's not true. It has to do with capacity in the Olympics. What do you think?
Well, it's really hard to say for certain what the real story behind the story is. The truth is that systems nowadays are all built for a certain capacity. In other words, they can handle so many tens or so many hundreds of thousands of messages per second, and anything beyond that, the infrastructure simply isn't built to handle. So it certainly would make sense to me that if there was a real strong surge at a moment in time, that would then have a potential effect of bringing the system down. And that's what it used to be the case, is that it was growing faster than they could build it up to support it. And it might be the same thing because of a sudden surge. That's quite possible. Although that's not their official story. Their official story is that they did have a technical glitch in parallel between two different segments of their technology that coincidentally failed at the same time, and that's what took them down this time. And
this is the second time in the month of July. What did they need to do to make sure this doesn't happen again?
The challenge that they have, I don't claim to understand 100%, and I don't know that anybody does unless you are like a Facebook or Twitter where you're supporting tens or hundreds of millions of people on the system. Because you really end up having servers literally around the world, and there's a certain number of things that have to click in place at the right moment, at the right time. So there are a tremendous amount of, complexities and dependencies of technology around the world that all need to work together. And at any point in time, they do work hard at building additional redundancies so that failure can happen at one spot without anybody noticing. But it's still a tremendous technical challenge.
And that challenge will obviously start tonight with the opening ceremonies, huh?
Right, and some people are expecting it might happen again. In fact, Twitter did hit a new record. Sports-related tweets hit 15,000 tweet messages per second. So if you just think about that for a minute, you know that takes serious amount of infrastructure just to support that alone.
Unbelievable. The modern world we live in, right, David?
No kidding. And another comment that one of the nerds made here this morning at breakfast was that, if this was a Facebook outage, it wouldn't be nearly as big a story. Because people on Twitter, those of us on Twitter, we interact with it, and sometimes continuously all day long. Whereas on Facebook, you might just be scrolling and looking and looking. You may not even notice an outage. But on Twitter, it definitely is noticed now.
Well, I noticed it around the radio station. I heard yesterday afternoon, God forbid, Twitter was off for half an hour. Panic in the halls, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
David, listen, it's always great talking to you, and thank you very much for your insight.
No problem. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, Dave Redekop from Nerds on Site here on News Talk at 1290 CJBK.